Inside the Plan with the 401k Brothers is a production of Horizon Retirement Plans, a division of Horizon Financial Group. Bill and Andy Bush are indeed brothers, but are not twins. Hello, everybody. Welcome to Inside the Plan with the 401k Brothers. I'm Brother Bill.
And I'm Brother Andy.
Andy, what is the first best financial decision you ever made? Do you even remember it?
Oh, that's a great question. I did not know I was being deposed.
These are just questions. This is a quiz to start off the podcast.
My first best financial decision.
First really good, solid financial decision. I'll tell you mine.
Okay, please. While I think.
Well, I think mine goes back to high school, or one of our organizations at school was having a trip. And if I wanted to go on that trip, I needed to raise money to do that. So I went to work and I started saving over quite a extended period of time, maybe 6-8 months, and came up with the money to go on that trip.
Yeah.
And so that was kind of one of the first big things that I realized there's currency out there. You got to earn it and spend it how you want. And in this case, I wanted to go on the trip.
Yeah. Well, that reminds me, first of all, thanks for reminding me.
Yes.
I think my first job, my first job in a corporate environment was when I was 14.
Oh, wow.
I was a young janitor for an engineering firm, friends of our families. And I remember talking about saving. Now, you and I, if people have listened to this podcast long enough, they know we were blue collar working parents and a big family. And
the parents didn't pay for my trip. That's right. I had to earn it.
That's right. And so nothing was really ever handed to us. You know, we had to go out, and we learned very early to go earn. Anyway, this first job that I had as the janitor, where I came in on like a Monday and Thursday or something like that for a few hours, started to earn dollars. Yeah. And the first thing I ever bought, I saved up to buy a watch.
Hey.
And I remember saving up, and it was probably a $20 watch or something, which at that time would have equated to probably 7 hours or 6 hours of work, because it wasn't a high wage we earned back then per hour.
Man, I don't remember you having that job, but I was probably out of the house already.
You were
14, I would have been 19.
Right. Yeah, that's right. You would have been driving around in that.
Which was another financial decision,
that's
right?
That's right.
Earned money to buy the car because the parents weren't going to buy the car.
Yeah. I think that's it, is we had to learn at an early age that we had to be responsible to do our own thing, right? And there's probably other things that I've done, I mean, business-wise, that I could look at. I think for Heather and I, personally, it was, instead of selling the house that we owned and taking the little bit of equity that we would have had at the time we were interested in maybe selling, and then going and buying in a place that obviously would have been a more popular place, a little more premium than what we owned, we would have ended up probably more than doubling what our principal and interest, mortgage payment was. And so instead, we just said, we're staying here and we're going to make this our house.
Yeah.
And we've been in that house for, 18 years.
Did plenty of remodeling.
Great. Some of it I did myself. Some of it we contracted out. And I think thinking back to had we made the decision to sell and move, I just can't imagine the levels of stress that would have added to me.
Yeah, for sure.
Because the monthly payment would have been, like I said, probably double, if not more, had we gone to a place of more popular setting. And so
how long ago would that have been?
So it was only like a few years into the house. So it would have been 16 years ago.
Wow.
And that would have been that, like I said, I can only imagine just the levels of stress, because I know we had stress having not moved, for different things. And I think everybody only looks through life through their own lens, and so whatever's most pressing for them at the time is going to potentially provide a level of stress.
Well, it turns out there actually is an age in which, an exact age kind of, that people make their best financial decisions.
Yeah.
This is according to an article that was recently it appeared in the Wall Street Journal by Claire Ansberry.
Yeah.
And it was interesting. And for a couple of reasons, the age is 53, 54, right in there.
Well, golly, that's right in my wheelhouse.
Exactly. And for me, that would have been 5 years ago.
Did you make the most?
Yeah, I think. But anyway, I thought we would take a look at this article and make some really good points. And why is it that 53, 54 age range right in there turns out to be a really premium spot to make really good financial decisions?
Yeah. I think your question about when I can remember making a good financial decision and us talking about saving for things, I think about, mindsets when you're in your teens, 20s, for sure your teens and 20s, you're a little more idealistic about the world and how the things work. You're probably a little more less understanding of how things work, so to speak. And you have a little too much false hope, I guess you would say. It's more, I think I would call it, and we've talked about this before, magical thinking, right? That, it's going to work out.
Yeah, right.
And I'm going to take and you don't realize the risk, that you take.
And you want to be optimistic, but at the same time, realistic.
Oh, absolutely.
So, it turns out, according to this article, obviously people make mistakes.
Sure.
Any age, really. But they made fewer mistakes at this particular age. And part of the reason is you mentioned, okay, I'm 53, I'm 54 now. I have quite a bit of history now behind me, and I've learned things.
Yep.
And that learning has probably been a little more ingrained in you than, say, someone really younger.
Yeah, you've had some great past experiences. You've increased your knowledge. And then, you probably a little bit apply more rules of thumb. And I think from experience, you realize, those are pretty accurate.
Yeah, right. Also turns out, Andy, that in the 50s people are actually open to getting help, right?
Yeah.
Seeking advice and knowing that, hey, even though I have this track record, this history, and I've got a lot of information behind me, maybe I don't know everything.
Yeah. And so as a younger person, maybe it was you were trying to impress people or to prove yourself. And I think by your 50s, you're like, I don't really care to impress anybody. And I only have myself to live with, or me and my spouse to live with. And so I just want to improve. I want to be a better me. And I think that comes after the going through, I don't know if everybody really goes through a midlife crisis, but just going through the stage of realizing kind of to your point of riding the runway decade, right? With Brother Pete, it's like, and you realize your runway is not that far, it is not that long anymore,
right. Yeah.
And I've got to do some stuff to get things in order if I ever want to retire.
Yeah. And so other things that folks in their 50s, because they've been around a while, they've experienced these market drops like we had, last year. And so for someone young, it's like that has actually been maybe an investor that's been in the market for 15 years even. They haven't experienced quite what we saw, these pullbacks. But if you're in your 50s, you've seen that.
Well, you've definitely seen it. Thinking back to, I started in this career in 1999. And of course, 2000, 2001, 2002 were not great years.
Right.
And then 2008 and beginning of 9 were certainly not great years. We've experienced those hiccups. Now, the 80s and 90s had some pullbacks, but they had some massive growth to them too. And so that was part of it, is there's a little bit more fluff and stuff in the markets coming into the early 2000s.
Yeah.
But having experienced it, and this is the beauty of it, is experiencing it and then realizing this too will pass.
Right.
And so it's, I talk about getting your head out of the weeds of the moment and seeing the perspective of history. And the perspective is, as long as there's people on the planet consuming stuff, they're buying from companies that sell those things. And if those companies are public, then they're likely to be more and more valuable if they're providing more and more goods and services to the people that buy them.
Yeah.
And so you realize that, that you can only control certain things, and there's a lot of stuff you can't control.
Absolutely. And the article does cite a couple of mistakes that folks in their 50s do make. I think there's an example of someone maybe getting a little too conservative too soon. And that goes hand in hand with another one that's cited saying people tend to underestimate how long they're going to live.
Yeah, there's no doubt about that. We've talked about that before many times, about that. It's very possible a person that retires at 65 has 30 years, of retirement life. And so if you're not planning for taking breaths at 90 and 95 years old, you're going to put yourself in a tough situation at those ages. Now, you may not need as much to spend, but you're still going to have to eat. You're still going to have lights to turn on and a place to live that might have expenses to it. And so you got to consider those things and plan for them.
Another thing that we talk about a lot is, especially in the runway decade, is once you're 50, okay, now you're able to do catch-up contributions if you're covered by a company retirement plan or in an IRA. You can do a little more. You're at that age where you look at retirement savings and realize that, okay, I only have so much time left to make that stockpile bigger.
Yeah, and I think it's right around that age of 50 where your kids are probably finally getting out of the house or off your payroll. And so you might have a little extra discretionary income or left over from your income. Some folks may have paid their house off, and so that big loan, that debt that you were servicing, now you have those dollars to go towards retirement. And we've talked before too about when we meet with participants, you always say, try to increase your contribution every year, but particularly if you pay a car note off or some other debt off. And I think too, thinking about like consumer debt, like credit cards and things, by this time in your life, because I think of experiences, I kind of go through that thought process when I buy something of, am I going to be wanting to use this thing in 2 years? Or is this something that I'm really super excited about right now, but I may not want it in a couple of years? Why would I want to put my good hard-earned money into something that's not going to last?
Yeah.
And so you have a better perspective about where your money's going.
Yeah, for sure. Well, I think about, I just had my 40th high school year reunion. Yeah, 40th year high school reunion back in August. And a few of the pictures were from that trip.
Yeah.
I'd saved my, and so that was one of those things, even early on, I thought this is an experience that has some value and it wasn't a thing, right? It was sharing that time, that week with close friends and classmates. And so it's still kind of paying dividends even 40 years later. We're talking about that at the reunion and things like that.
Yeah. It's interesting too, that becoming, I'm a relatively new empty nester. My kids my daughter's a junior in college. My son's a senior in college. And so they're pretty much empty nesters. My daughter was in town, worked a internship this summer. So she lived with us this summer, which was great. But it is interesting once you pivot from having to always take care of the kids, help them get to places or support their activities, whether that's sports or, in your case, your daughter's a tremendous actress and gets involved in that theater, that then you start to realize, okay, well, there's not as much activity around the house. There's not as much running and being on the roads. And so it's a different, then you do have a little bit more time to see a little further down the road and have perspective on that.
Yeah, for sure. So just kind of to wrap things up, if you want to check out that article from the Wall Street Journal, the title is The Exact Age When You Make Your Best Financial Decisions. Worth a quick read.
Absolutely.
We saw that. And there was another source that had that same kind of feel to it recently, kind of in the industry.
Yeah.
Is Nick Murray. He's kind of a guru that coaches and advisors, and he brought it up in his latest newsletter, this notion of the 50s is a sweet spot.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely true. that people start to become self-aware about the way they spend money. This article that we're citing from Wall Street Journal, if you look at it, it talks about kind of the moments, particularly in years where you realize, I don't want to pay a late fee for my credit card,
Right.
or I want to make sure that all these things are atoned for, taken care of, and I really don't have to. I've wisened up. Is that the word? Wisened up?
Sure. We'll go with that.
I've wised up to wasting money. And so
Yeah.
it's pretty interesting, some of the data that comes along with this.
Yeah.
But yeah, it is. It's definitely the Runway Decade book definitely helps you, has some thinking tools in there to make you think forward of, well, what's the next 5 years look like? The next 10 years, the next 15 years. And the more you can prepare, you may not be able to prepare for everything, and you're not going to be mistake free when it comes to finances.
For sure.
But you're wiser and you recover more quickly, and you probably don't extend yourself so much risk wise that if you do have a mistake, that it costs you so much. And so if you can do that, protect yourself against the big blows, then you'll be better off for sure.
Yeah. And I think another thing, if you are in your 50s, just know that time is ticking, right? It's just like on the runway. The plane starts off slow, but by the time you get to the end of the runway, it's really booking. And that's kind of the way I felt about the 50s. You talk about being 53. It seemed like that was a couple of weeks ago for me, but it was 5 years ago. Time just keeps rolling.
Yeah, it rolls quickly.
Yeah. And so anyway, well, that's a good discussion about age and financial decisions. If you need to reach out to us and would like to have a conversation about your situation, you can email me, Bill Bush. That's bbush at horizonfg.com.
Or you can reach out to me, Andy Bush, at abush at horizonfg.com.
All right, that's going to wrap up this edition of Inside the Plan with the 401k Brothers. I'm Brother Bill.
And I'm Brother Andy.
We are brothers,
but not twins.
The opinions of the hosts and guests of this podcast are for general information purposes only and are not to be construed as specific advice or recommendations for any individual. You should consult with a qualified financial professional to determine what is appropriate for you. The advisors of Horizon Financial Group offer securities and advisory services through Cetera Advisors, member FINRA SIPC. Cetera Advisors is under separate ownership from any other named entity. Horizon Financial Group, 8280 YMCA Plaza Drive, Building 5, Baton Rouge, Louisiana, 70810. Advisors of Horizon are registered representatives of Cetera Advisors, a broker-dealer and registered investment advisor.